Welcome to Cheating Tales Diary. Before we dive into today's story, we have a humble request. Please consider subscribing to this new channel. Help us hit our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers. Your support will motivate us to keep bringing you more exclusive original cheating wife stories. And now, let's get started with today's story. Luke and Amy's friendship was built from the mud of childhood. The kind of bond that grew out of scraped knees, shared secrets, and after-school snacks. From doing each other's homework to covering for each other's mistakes, they were inseparable. People used to say, "I wish I had a friendship like theirs." Then came college. That's when Luke met me. Emily. I was different, more serious, more grounded, with my feet planted firmly in the future. And maybe that's what Luke liked. I wasn't wild. I wasn't reckless. I was stability. As we got closer and started dating, there was always this shadow next to us. Amy. She wasn't malicious. In fact, when we got married, she helped with the planning, picked out decorations, even helped me pick my dress. That broke the ice. The three of us, Luke, Amy, and I, became this tight trio. People saw us everywhere together. Weddings, weekends, birthdays. When Luke and I had our kids, Sophie, Owen, Lewis, and little Carter, Amy was right there for everything. Birthday parties, school events, babysitting. She didn't just show up, she stepped in, and I appreciated that. At least, at first. But then I started noticing things. Amy had 4 kids too. Tom, Kay, and the twins, Adam and Jenna. No father in the picture, no relationship, just 4 kids. And every time I gently asked, "So, who's the dad?" she'd just laugh and say, "Some stories are better unfinished." I used to laugh it off too, until I couldn't. Because every time Amy got pregnant, Luke was somehow always around. He'd take her to doctor's appointments. He was there during her ultrasounds. He was the first one holding the babies. He looked proud. Too proud. I'd try to brush it off. They're childhood friends. He's just being supportive. That's what I told myself. But suspicion? It's not something you can just turn off. And the kids? The resemblance was getting harder to ignore. Amy's kids, their eyes, their smiles, their little quirks, started to look way too much like Luke's. Was I imagining things? I asked myself that a lot, but the doubt didn't go away. It just grew louder. Section 2. Echoes in the Faces of Children. We looked like a perfect family. Luke and I had 4 beautiful kids. Sophie was the eldest, sharp, kind-hearted. Then came Owen, our sports junkie. Lewis, our quiet bookworm. And Carter, our baby boy with the loudest laugh in the house. From the outside, we were flawless. Sunday church, summer road trips, matching Christmas pajamas. But inside me, something had started to crack. It began with little things. One day at the park, I watched Owen and Amy's son Tom play soccer. They moved the same. Same way of kicking the ball. Same way of wiping sweat from their brow. Same fire in their voice when they shouted instructions to teammates. My stomach twisted. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and whispered to my reflection, "Is it just me? Or is there really something off?" Then came the school photo. An old class picture where Sophie and Tom stood side by side. My breath caught in my throat. Same dimples, same smirks, same light in their eyes. And then the allergy. Luke has a severe nut allergy, a genetic one. It's something we've always been careful about. And then I found out Tom and Kay, Amy's oldest, have the same exact allergy, same reaction, same emergency medication. Coincidence? Maybe once. But this many? I felt my chest tighten. I spoke to Luke's mom, my mother-in-law, a wise, perceptive woman. At first, she laughed it off. "Emily, you're overthinking. Luke isn't that kind of man." But then she added quietly, But if your heart keeps telling you something's wrong, don't ignore it. A mother's instinct isn't usually wrong. And mine? Mine was screaming now. Emily was now standing on the edge, a point where the strength of her relationships was starting to collapse under the weight of quiet lies. She realized that if she kept her eyes closed any longer, this silence would one day destroy everything. Not just her marriage, but her children's identities, their future, and their emotional well-being. This wasn't just doubt anymore. It was fear. The restless fear of a mother, the silent panic of a wife, and a woman's aching question. If this is all true, who do I blame? Luke, Amy, or myself for seeing the signs and still looking away? But answers were nowhere in sight. She was trapped in a pattern of painful similarities, where every smile now carried suspicion, every face raised a question, and the word family started to feel like a secret wrapped in warmth. For a long time, she kept telling herself that Luke was just being responsible, just being a good friend, that his involvement with Amy's kids was only out of kindness. But when that kindness began crossing unspoken lines, the doubt became too loud to ignore. Luke showed up everywhere Amy needed a man. School meetings, hospital emergencies, even errands like car servicing. His presence was so regular, Amy's neighbors stopped calling him Uncle Luke. They started calling him Dad. One day, Emily asked, "Do you really think it's necessary to involve yourself in every detail of Amy's life?" Luke just shrugged. "Who else does she have? If I don't help her, who will?" The words sounded right, but the way he said them didn't. There was a depth in his voice that didn't belong in a husband's explanation. Emily noticed more. Luke wasn't just helping with the kids. He was paying Amy's bills, donating to her kids' school, even organizing their birthday parties. She remembered one Christmas when she asked, "Where should we take the kids this year?" And Luke casually replied, "I told Amy I'd go to church with her kids. It's their first Christmas performance at school." Emily's face went pale. Her own children's holiday came second? That was the first time she realized. Uncle Luke was a persona, a mask, a cover to protect the image of a good man doing the right thing. But something darker was hiding beneath it. What bothered Emily even more was how Amy always dodged the question. Every time Emily asked, "Who's the father of your kids?" Amy would laugh and deflect. Sometimes she'd say, "It was an old relationship, not worth mentioning." Other times, "I raised my kids on my own. That's all that matters." But then Emily opened up old college albums, pictures of Luke, and there she was, Amy, in frame after frame, sometimes behind him, sometimes beside him, sometimes in his arms. That's when the doubt started to take shape. Then one evening, Luke came home and said, "Tom had a fever. I stayed at Amy's to look after him." Just minutes later, Emily received a text from Tom's teacher. Tom was in school the entire day. Something inside her broke. The just helping excuse was done. That night, she tried to check Luke's phone to see the messages between him and Amy, but it was password protected. A new password, one she didn't know. "What are you hiding from me?" she asked. Luke replied coldly, "You've gotten into this habit of overthinking everything." That tone, that dismissal, it shut another door inside her. This was no longer about suspicion. This was betrayal, emotional betrayal. And Luke had already crossed that line. He wasn't just helping raise Amy's children. He was part of them. Their story, their origin, their secret, all hidden in a darkness she could now feel breathing at her doorstep. Sophie and Tom had been friends since they were little. Birthday parties, holiday photos, school projects. Emily never questioned it. Their bond reminded her of Luke and Amy's. Old, deep, wrapped in the harmless label of just friends. But in their final year of high school, something shifted. Sophie didn't look at Tom the same way. Her glances grew softer. Her voice changed when she spoke to him. Her laughter carried a nervous kind of blush. One day, Emily picked up Sophie's phone just to check the time, and a message popped up. Tom, will you go to prom with me? Sophie, if Mom says yes, then yes. Emily felt her chest tighten. Her daughter, the one she trusted the most, was saying yes to a boy she now feared could be her husband's son. That night, Emily locked the bedroom door and cried alone. How could she stop Sophie from going to prom without telling her the reason? But how could she tell her daughter that Tom might be her half-brother? Her mind started piecing everything together. Tom's birth, Luke's constant visits to Amy's that year, Amy's vague replies when asked about the father. He wasn't someone important. Emily remembered how, that same year, Sophie was 2 and Louis had just started walking, and Luke was spending every third evening at Amy's house. Amy suddenly went on a relaxing trip for 2 weeks and came back with a newborn in her arms, a baby with Luke's eyes. Emily remembered a photo. Tom was 3, Sophie was 4. They were standing side by side, smiling like siblings. Back then, someone had said, "Your kids are adorable." And she had smiled, replying casually, "They're not mine, just friends." But anyone looking at that photo wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. That memory now haunted her. Doubt wasn't just keeping her up at night. It was consuming her. One morning, as Sophie was getting ready for school, Emily stopped her gently and asked, "What do you think about Tom?" Sophie smiled. "He's different, Mom. He gets me. When Dad isn't around. Tom is. He doesn't feel like anyone else. He feels, I don't know. He just feels close." Emily looked at her daughter's innocent face and felt something inside her crumble. She picked up a notepad and wrote down a number. Her attorneys. She couldn't wait anymore. Either the truth would come out, or her daughter might unknowingly fall in love with her own brother. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about her children's lives. Their future. That night, for the first time, Emily said to herself, "If I don't do something now, everything will fall apart." Sleep had left her eyes. Questions remained. Every morning, as she packed lunch and zipped backpacks, she'd watch Sophie and Tom laugh together, whisper, share earbuds on the bus. And each time, her heart pounded with the same thought. What if they're siblings? This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was a race against time. A race to reach the truth before it was too late. Emily started with her lawyer. In New Jersey, the rules around DNA testing minors were strict, especially when the parents weren't giving joint consent. But her lawyer was smart. He said, "If the kids request the test themselves and it stays between them, we might not be breaking any laws, just skimming the edge." Emily didn't say a word to Sophie. But Sophie could feel something had changed. One night, as Emily was sitting at her desk, pretending to read, Sophie walked in, silent, holding a folded piece of paper instead of her book. Inside were just 4 lines. "I know something's not right. Tom doesn't feel like someone else. If you're hiding something from me, please don't. I want to know. I want to get tested." Emily read the note and let out a deep breath. She didn't speak. She just pulled her daughter into a hug. No excuses, no explanations, just quiet acknowledgement. 2 days later, Sophie and Tom went to a local testing lab. Emily had already made the appointment under anonymous entries. They submitted hair samples, saliva, and even shared their medical histories. Emily waited outside like a mother waiting for an exam to end. Except this wasn't about grades. It was about truth. About lives. And then, fate handed Emily something she hadn't even been looking for. Luke forgot to shut down his laptop. That night, while getting water from the kitchen, she saw the screen still glowing. A chat window was open, Amy's name at the top. Her hands shook as she scrolled. It wasn't just recent messages. It was a backup of chats going back 15 years. Messages between Luke and Amy. Photos. At hotels. In Amy's living room. One image showed Amy pregnant, with Luke standing behind her, his hand on her belly. There were videos, not from any app, real recordings. In one, Amy looked into the camera and said, "This baby is yours, and you can't run from that." Emily didn't need a DNA report anymore. The truth was right there. Raw, shameless, undeniable. That night, Emily didn't cry. She didn't fall apart. She burned, quietly, from the inside, with a fire that didn't scream. It planned. She grabbed an external hard drive, copied everything, and sent it all to her lawyer. Then she hired a private investigator, not just to prove the affair, but to prove deliberate deception, to show that this wasn't just infidelity, it was an orchestrated betrayal of an entire family. By the time the DNA results arrived, Emily had already set the stage and prepared herself. That night felt like a black storm for Emily, one that tore through every memory, every relationship, every ounce of trust she had left. The DNA results and the evidence on Luke's laptop had stripped away the last veil from her eyes. She was no longer confused. Her husband hadn't just cheated. He had built an entire second life, a second family, right in front of her, with her closest friend. She didn't need to think any longer. Late that night, when the house was silent, Emily laid all the evidence out on the table one last time. She stared at it, then whispered to herself, "No more." She walked downstairs, opened the storage closet, and pulled out the large black trash bags. One by one, she packed everything that belonged to Luke. His suits, his ties, his shirts, his watches, even his shoes. When Luke returned home, he found his things already waiting outside the front door. Confused, he stepped up to the porch. As he rang the bell, the door opened, and there stood Emily, holding a thick envelope. "Emily, what is this?" Luke asked, his voice unsteady. "This," she said coldly, "is your new home, the sidewalk. And these are your new documents. Divorce papers." He opened his mouth to speak, but she gave him no space for excuses. She took a step forward and pressed the envelope hard against his chest. "You lost the right to speak the day you built a relationship behind my back. With my best friend," Emily said. Her voice didn't tremble. There were no tears in her eyes, only fire. "Emily, please, the kids deserve the truth," she replied. "But I won't tell them everything, not yet. I'll just say their father needs to be away for a while." Luke stepped back slowly. His eyes were downcast. He knew now. No apology, no explanation could bring her back. That night wasn't about sleep. It was about strength. Emily walked through every room in the house. The walls still covered in family photos, the books they once read together, the pillows where their kids lay their heads. Everything now felt like betrayal. But she didn't throw anything away. She made herself a promise. This house now belonged to the children. There would be no more lies here. The next morning, Sophie asked, "Where did Dad go?" Emily smiled softly. "He's gone for a while, but I'm here, and I'll always be here." There was fear in Sophie's eyes, but she took her mother's hand. And in that touch, Emily felt something that told her she'd done the right thing. That day, Emily didn't just say goodbye to a cheating husband. She said goodbye to a dream that had already broken. Weeks passed since Luke had been sent away, but peace hadn't returned. Every day brought a new emotional wound. More questions from the kids, notes from school, awkward looks from neighbors. But Emily stayed strong. She refused to show weakness, especially in front of the man who had split her life in two. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, Emily's heart stopped for a moment. Amy was standing there. There was no guilt in her face, no shame, just that same familiar smile. Only now it carried a trace of madness. "Amy?" Emily asked, her voice cold and sharp. Amy walked in without being invited. "We need to talk. This has to end. Whatever you have, the photos, the videos, delete everything." Emily crossed her arms. "You should have come to ask for forgiveness, Amy. But instead, you're here to threaten me?" Amy's eyes lit up with anger. "Forgiveness? I don't need forgiveness from you. Luke and we've wanted each other for a long time. And if you'd been the perfect wife you pretend to be, he never would have left you." Emily took a deep breath. Her hands stayed clenched, but her voice was like stone. "You were my best friend. You planned my wedding. You became my daughter's godmother. And now you're the mother of my husband's other children?" For a moment, Amy's face cracked, then turned red with rage. "I've had enough," she shouted, and with one violent swing, she grabbed Emily's laptop off the table and smashed it to the ground. The screen shattered with a sharp crack. Emily stood still in shock. But what came next was worse. Amy lunged. She raised her hand toward Emily. But Emily stepped back just in time. The walls echoed with the chaos. From upstairs, she heard her daughter's frightened voice. "Mom!" Emily pulled out her phone, quickly started recording, and dialed 911. Amy froze. She hadn't expected that. Her face twisted from rage into fear. She began mumbling, "You don't understand what I've been through. You shouldn't be doing this." Emily opened the door and pointed. "Get out. Now or next time, the police won't just come. They'll take you from this doorstep." Amy stared at her. Emily's eyes held no tears, no emotion, only warning. Cold, direct, and final. Amy turned and left. Behind her, she left a shattered laptop, shaking children, and another wound. Emily filed a police report. She submitted CCTV footage. This was no longer just betrayal. It had become a criminal offense. That night, Emily wrapped her arms around Sophie and whispered, "You won't have to go through any of this alone. I promise." And for the first time, Sophie hugged her back, tightly. In that child's embrace, Emily found the strength she needed for the fight still ahead. The last poison Amy had spat had turned into fire inside Emily. A fire fueled by justice, protection, and the need to guard her children's future. As soon as Amy stormed out of the house, Emily closed the front door, and with it, every door in her heart. While picking up the shattered pieces of her laptop, she knew exactly what she needed now: the truth. And that truth wasn't far. The DNA test Sophie and Tom had taken was due any day. Emily knew this report wouldn't just affect their future. It would finally confront her deepest fear. The report arrived. Plain envelope. Nothing unusual about it, except that what was written inside was enough to stop Emily's breath cold. Sophie and Tom were not siblings. That was the first line she saw. A deep breath escaped her chest, like she'd been drowning and someone had pulled her up just in time. But then her eyes moved to the next paragraph. K. High probability of biological relation to Luke. Emily felt the world tilt. Flashbacks. Amy's laughter. Luke's constant visits to Amy's home. The kids' faces. The allergies. Every little piece clicked together. Perfectly, painfully. A 15-year affair, once only a suspicion, now inked in DNA. Undeniable. Emily told herself, it doesn't matter when it started. What matters is when it ends. She didn't show the report to Sophie, or to Tom. She didn't want the kids to break any more than they already had. Emily made a decision. This wasn't just a story of betrayal anymore. It was about protection now. Legal, emotional, and moral protection for her children. She called her attorney. I want the DNA report added to the case, and I need legal ways to keep Amy away from my kids. What the lawyer heard wasn't the frustration of a broken woman. It was the voice of a mother who had now turned her pain into purpose. Emily upgraded the house security, digital locks on all doors, new CCTV system installed. She sat the kids down and said, "From now on, no unfamiliar person is allowed in, no matter who they are." Sophie looked up. "Mom, is Kay my sister?" Emily paused, then quietly replied, "Blood doesn't always define family. Real family is what you live, what you protect. Kay, she's Amy's daughter, but she's not ours." The conversation ended there, but its impact lingered. Luke was still hiding out at his parents' home. He had called, texted, emailed, long apologies, desperate messages, promises soaked in regret. Emily didn't respond. Not once. To her, every word from Luke now felt like another lie, and she had no time left in her life for lies. Amy hadn't made another move either. Maybe she finally realized Emily wasn't the woman who would bend anymore. She was a mother now, one who had turned into a lioness. Emily made a final decision. From now on, Amy's children, Tom, Kay, Adam, and Jenna, would be kept at a distance. School events, parent meetings, birthday invites, all would be handled with clear boundaries. If Tom and Sophie remained friends, that friendship would now come with an unspoken line neither of them would be allowed to cross. And that same line? Emily drew it across every part of her life. No one would betray her again, because now she had what she never had before, the truth. And with that truth, she stood tall, alone, but unshakable. Before locking the DNA report away in a folder, she read it one last time. Kay, biological daughter of Luke. Emily stared at the page and said softly, "Whatever you are, I will not let you poison my children's lives." She folded the paper, placed it inside the file, locked it in the cabinet, and whispered to herself, "The next battle won't be about fear. It'll be about control." Emily's life had reached a point where looking back served no purpose, and the road ahead was lined with thorns. But she knew it was through those thorns that she'd carve out a new ground for dignity, not just for herself, but for Sophie and every child under her roof. Luke now lived in a single room at his parents' house. The man who once walked through his office like he owned Google now spent his days under the shadow of his father's scolding and his mother's shame. His relationship with Amy had collapsed. The moment Amy saw Luke publicly calling their affair a mistake, she walked away for good. On social media, Amy's face was everywhere. The other woman, the homewrecker, the liar with 4 kids and no husband. The internet is an unforgiving courtroom. And Amy, she was its main defendant now. Emily, meanwhile, had begun to rebuild herself. Slowly, but with purpose. She joined a women's support group. Every week, she sat with other women who had been shattered by love. But Emily stood out. Because while she was broken, she wasn't destroyed. She remodeled her entire house, repainted every corner, hung new words on every wall. Strength, truth, honor. It was her way of purifying the ground she walked on. Sophie grew closer to her. She'd enrolled in college to study psychology. Maybe because, watching her mother, she'd learned how dangerous and complicated the human mind could be, and how understanding it could save lives. Emily kept her distance from Amy's children, but she never said a bad word about them. At a PTA meeting, a mother once said, "Adam's just like his dad. You know, Luke." Emily replied, "Children don't carry the burden of their parents' mistakes. Give them a chance to become their own people." This was the new Emily, not emotional, but responsible. One day, Luke sent one last long email. It read, "I've lost everything. You, my kids, my name, my dignity. I still wake up every morning wishing I could turn back time. But I know now, some relationships never come back. I wasn't a good man, and maybe I won't be a good father either. But if there's one thing I ask, it's this. Please don't teach our children to hate me the way I've earned it." Emily read the email. She didn't reply, but she did turn to Sophie and say, "Your father is your father, but you will decide what kind of relationship you want with him. I will never force you. A mother is meant to guide, not control." Amy now lived in a rundown apartment. Her son, Tom, the one who had stayed closest to Sophie, still visited Emily sometimes. One day, he said, "I know my mom did a lot of things wrong, but can I tell you something? You always treated us with respect, even when our own mother lied to us." Emily placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Then speak the truth, Tom, because if you don't, the world will only see you as Amy's son. And you're so much more than that." At the end of the school year, Sophie's college held its award ceremony. She won the Best Leadership Award. When she took the stage, this is what she said. "I learned leadership from my mother. She taught me how to gather yourself when everything falls apart, how to stand back up and smile again. Thank you, Mom." Emily's eyes welled up, but those weren't tears of pain. They were tears of pride. She hadn't just gotten justice for herself. She'd left behind a lesson for the next generation. That no matter how deep the betrayal, if you hold on to your self-respect, you never truly lose. Her house was no longer built with bricks and cement. It was built with truth, with strength, with the dignity she had reclaimed from her own ashes. And that is where this story ends. Thank you for watching till the very end. If stories like this speak to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you're the first to know when the next story drops. We'll meet again with a new truth and a new story.